evening. I'd like to reconvene the regular session of our board meeting for March the 31st. Mrs. Troublefield, will you call roll?
Mrs. Briggs?
Here.
Mr. Cathell?
Here.
Mrs. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Peden?
Here.
Mrs. Pryor?
Here.
Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mrs. Taylor?
Here.
Mrs. West Warner? Mrs. Wright?
Here. We have 9 present. That does constitute a quorum. At this point in time, we would go to 3.01, which is public comment. I believe we have a couple signed up, but just to remind people, the school board welcomes the opportunity to hear from the public during our public comment session at the beginning and end of each public session. Members of the public speaking as individuals or a member who represents an organization will be allotted up to 3 minutes. As per board policy BDDH, in order to comply with the First Amendment, the board will not entertain protracted public comment within favor of or against a staff member. If a speaker makes defamatory statements or invades the privacy rights of a student or employee, the speaker is responsible for such statements and may be held liable. We thank you for adhering to this policy when public comments are shared.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Our first person signed up is Greg Linder.
Thank you. I'm Greg Linder from Millsboro. I came here to speak because of the referendum discussion. I was very fortunate to have the superintendent come to the peninsula along with a number of members of his staff to do a presentation to us about the referendum. I think it was very well received by the community, but I was very disappointed to see the end results of the referendum. I'm a former school board member. I used to sit on a table very much like this in Delaware and Chester County, Pennsylvania. A little bit of a different process that we have in Pennsylvania than you have in Delaware. But I think one of the things about the referendum, if I can just, bring up one of the points that I think was difficult for people, because about half the population or the voting population are people that came here after the last operational referendum that you had. So when you come from Pennsylvania or from Maryland or from Virginia or from Washington, D.C., New York, and New Jersey, you don't have a process like this. So when there's a discussion where these referendums don't happen, but maybe every 7 or 8 years, and the dollars that are being looked for are substantial dollars, people don't understand that the referendum is looking for money that's going to go for an extended period of time, and then you're going to spend those dollars down until you're ready for the next referendum. And so I probably spent a lot of time in my community because of the passion that I have for the referendums to just show people that if you were doing this on a yearly basis, you were doing about $33 a year, and then if you went across the time over 8 years, you would have hit the $290 or so that was the average. And so that's just not something that's understood by people, and I've heard the superintendent say this at the discussion we had, and I actually mentioned it to him. When you're in Pennsylvania and you do this on a yearly basis, and you have updates that are maybe 2.5% a year that happens, there's not a lot of complaints that occur within the community because it's a yearly basis. The schools are able to plan on a yearly basis, and you know that these things are going to happen on an ongoing basis. And so potentially, if you were going to do referendums again and you choose to come back to the community and do a referendum again, I would say one or two things. One, come back more frequently and do them for smaller amounts of money each time, and then be able to explain why it's being done, or have an excellent explanation as to what the yearly increase would have been had you done this on a more frequent basis, because I think it would be very helpful for those of us that came from other states and have not dealt with this type of a process before to be able to take it in bite-sized pieces. So again, I was fortunate to be on the school board. I handed 3 children their diplomas and have that passion, and I'm hopeful that you're able to do things that'll help the education process within the state, because it's the way that you have educated students that help with the workforce and have a lot of other benefits beyond that. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your discussion on the referendum.
Thank you.
Blair Catlin Brown.
Good morning, Blair Catlin Brown, school social worker at Southern Delaware School of the Arts. Tonight, speaking from a slightly different perspective, you know all the other things I do, mostly speaking from an employee and parent perspective tonight. Employee perspective because I'm really concerned about my coworkers. Parent perspective because teacher working conditions are student learning conditions, and I'm really concerned about the anxiety that's being spread everywhere. Staff morale, I know I've already said it, but I can't say it enough. I don't know if it could get lower. I'm really concerned with the lack of transparency when it comes to exactly why some of the moves are happening. Like I said to this body before, darkness is harder to take than truth, and the truth is what we're all seeking. And we're turning into little detectives, talking to each other, trying to figure things out, where it would just be easier if someone would lay it out and explain it to us. I get the whole protection of HR and matters and things like that, but we are just left confused and wondering, and that's an awful place to be. So again, I always try to come with things that I would love this body to do. Transparency. I've always pushed that if you guys could take some time to meet with staff, whether it's come to buildings, hold coffee hours, come to the fundraiser on Thursday at Grotto's in Millsboro. But we need, I'm always gonna sell it, but we need to see you guys. We need to know that you are with us, and we need to know that you will have our backs, even if it's a difficult choice that you're making. The other thing in my last minute and a half is we need you to pick a date for this referendum. If it is left wide open, what is that saying? That is saying that there is no solution to this. That is saying we are just waiting and seeing what happens. The contract that we agreed to does have, cost of living increases. Some people in the community have been saying they're huge raises. They're not. They're well within the definition of what a cost of living increase is. Teachers have gone a year without one. Parent secretaries have gone 2 years without one. We need to have hope on the horizon because we have to have something to look toward. So if you don't pick a date tonight, then what are we doing? We're just floundering and hoping something comes. So please pick a date, and also just whatever we can do, and please feel free to contact me if you need any ideas. We need to see your faces in the schools, whether it's during the school day, holding something in the community. People need to know you're with us in the hard times and the good times. Thank you.
Jacob Bushler.
All right, thank you. So I'm Jake Bushler. As you will hear soon, I am a tenured teacher that's being displaced. Been teaching for 11 years, 9 in the district. And in the past 5 years, I don't think there's been a teacher in this district that's put a more public target on their back for standing up for what I and many others believe was right. I called out reckless spending. I called out the hiring and all that during COVID. I called out the ridiculous mandates. Let me remind you of a few. The masking, the vaccines, all that stuff. I called that out, and we're not doing any of it today. And in hindsight, I was right. And the result of it is now this spending, I am being displaced from my current job. And I was one of the few people saying stuff. I've been a teacher who's always said what I think is right. And I can't tell you how many staff members, board members, parents, people have reached out and to thank me for saying those things. But that didn't come without the middle fingers and people demanding I lose my job. I knew that this spending was unsustainable before it happened. I spoke at past board meetings about it. I and 50 other employees attended a volunteer meeting during the summer of '22, and I thought of the district being proactive about the avalanche that we're experiencing today. I actually thought it was a brilliant and thoughtful way to go about it. We all laid out concerns with the budgets, and the teachers laid out potential solutions. I was amazed at the thoughtful suggestions, but nothing came of those. We were listened to and had no changes, and we just witnessed continued hiring and spending. It actually made me think that maybe the situation was solved. I suggested that during COVID, we'd see a learning regression, and I was right. We've seen that. And what have we done? We've lowered the standards and we're moving kids on, and then now we're getting more kids that need to qualify for special education, and I'm being moved because I don't have my special education degree. But our incentives as a district for what we pay don't align with that. We are subsidizing with course reimbursements for people to go get their master's, not in special education, just to go get it. So we're subsidizing their money to go get it, and then we're going to be on the hook to pay them more. Why are we giving them that benefit? They should have to make that sacrifice themselves to get paid more. If you really are trying to align your incentives with special education, why are you not only doing course reimbursements for special education? The next pay raise, if it's really, and this isn't me, the next pay raise needs to be for your special education. If that's what we are valuing as a district, that's what it needs to be. And it's very difficult to be in this situation. I've never seen it in our district when I was a student or a teacher, that a tenured teacher is just being displaced from theirs and has no idea or control of where they're going. And not for anything that I've done wrong. I worked for Ivan. I think I did a good job. There's many other people here that would say I've done a wonderful job. But our incentives are not aligned with what we're doing. So I hope that you guys are able to figure out some stuff. I do still trust that this is a good district. I'm hoping it works out for me. And God bless you guys. I hope you make the right decisions and are guided well. So thank you.
Jason Pilgrim.
Good evening, everybody. You know me, Jason Pilgrim. I'm IREA Secretary, but tonight I'm just speaking as an 11-year employee of the Indian River School District. So I wanted to first start off by just speaking to you guys, but also to our building and our district administrations. Just encouragement always to use wisdom in all your decisions that you make. This, as many people have already said, this is a tough time for many employees. Teachers are being displaced. Pretty soon, paras are going to be displaced in RIFT as well. And I would hate for what I fear to be is that this displacement and this RIFs may be used as an opportunity to push people out of certain buildings or to keep people from other buildings. I wouldn't want to see that. I would just want wisdom to be used in all the decisions that's made. And then for you guys, school board members, first off, thank you for your commitment to our school district. Thank you for the leadership and the determination that you guys have. I know it's not easy at all making any of these decisions whatsoever. But tonight, you're having a vote on displaced employees, RIFT employees. You're having a vote on the referendum, and we do need some clear answers. We need to know some clear answers. How much money are we looking for with the referendum? What's the date that you're proposing for this referendum? When it comes to displaced employees, are you following up with them? Are you following up with your district leadership and your building leadership to see that the process is being followed to the teacher contract like it should be? Because again, just wisdom is what I'm calling for in this situation. It's not an easy time. It's not a fun time for anybody. You guys and us out here in the front lines as well. So I'm just encouraging wisdom and just seek to answer your questions. Hopefully, get your questions answered. Ask them. In future years down the road, I would love to see, again, I'm calling for wisdom here. So when you have people up here and they're asking for match taxes and they're asking for all the things that you guys can do as a school board, actually consider them wisely and make your decisions based on the actual evidence that's at hand, not just because traditionally we don't do that. Okay, so that's what I was wanting to leave you guys with tonight. Thank you so much.
Those were the only 4 that signed up to speak. If there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak, they may come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will move on to new business, 5.01, 25-26 district programming considerations.
Yes, these will actually be part of the referendum slides we're going to show, so we've kind of combined those, so that can stay on, but I think the presentation will clarify some of those options. So I can begin here. What you'll see here is over the next few slides are a outline of some of the things that have occurred over the last couple months, weeks, and even days in terms of looking at our financial picture. Obviously, this was discussed pre-referendum, but with the current failure on March 20th, we wanted to take an additional look, so we have done that. We also wanted to show some similar information that was covered back in January with the kind of the financial landscape and picture moving forward. Mrs. Smith has analyzed that again, and I think you'll see that in her slides this evening. Again, we've also added, later on in the presentation, you'll see some options for future consideration. We obviously need to go out to a second referendum, so we'll talk about the timing of that, as well as programs that could be, and programs and staffing that could be impacted on a long-range basis if we have a additional failed referendum. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Smith.
All right, thank you. So in the first slide, looking back at FY25, so these are things, this is FY25, looking back at the discussions we've had since the fall, just a reiteration of some of the things that we're seeing from an expenditure perspective. So again, the last current expense referendum was back in 2017. And since then, we've experienced cost increases on many levels. But as an example, in 2022, the state introduced mental health services units. So as of this year, we're looking at about 50 units that we have earned at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels. Those are state and local funded units. So with those comes a local salary cost with OECs, and that's approximately $1.8 million a year. Our substitute costs from 2017 to last year, FY24 being the last full fiscal year, increased $948,000 or 72%. In part, this is due to paid parental leave that was implemented in FY18. The state does cover the cost of substitutes at the state rate, but only for classroom teachers. So we are paying, a premium rate to get substitutes in. We're competing with other districts to get them in. Plus, it's a long-term sub rate, and they're doing things like planning and parent-teacher conferences. So that has increased our sub costs because, again, it's only for the classroom teacher. Any other person, whether it's a para, whether it's maybe a physical therapist, the state is not covering the cost of those substitutes. That's a local cost that we have to bear. In addition, in January of 2026, the state is implementing paid caregiver leave. We don't yet know what that looks like, but we anticipate that we will have additional absences and need additional substitutes. Our homebound instructors between 2017 and 2024 increased 169,000 or 147%. Our charter choice payments, because we're sending more students out than bringing in, mostly due to capacity issues, increased by 1.8 million or 358%. Our utility cost increased 772,000 or 30%. Our private transportation cost increased 863,500 or 122%, and athletic transportation 127,000 or 145%. So what we're seeing is our expenses are outpacing those revenues. Looking at the past 3 fiscal years, looking at that post-COVID inflation period, our expenses are increasing about 7.4%, with our revenues only increasing about 3.55% on that discretionary side. So all of those costs, and that's just a sampling of them, but they're the bigger ones, are what is increasing the burden to the district and is putting us in the financial position that we are.
Mrs. Smith, you may have said this, I'm sorry if I missed
okay.
it. The paid parental leave and the paid caregiver leave, again, mandates.
Correct. They are mandated by the state.
And the state picks up a portion of just teachers or all staff?
So for paid parental leave, they only pay the state rate for the classroom teachers, not the increased rates that we pay to get substitutes in, and that we're paying for long-term subs that are doing that planning and things like parent-teacher conferences. But it's only for classroom teachers. So if it's a para, it's a custodian, it's a substitute, it's someone in a teacher unit that's not directly in a classroom, the state does not cover any of that. We do not yet know what the paid caregiver leave looks like, whether there will be any state assistance for substitutes with that. So looking forward to fiscal year 26, that starts July 1st, 2025. There is uncertainty in that fiscal year and going forward due to state and federal funding and inflationary costs. So we hope that inflation is leveling out, but we haven't had enough of a picture to be able to see that yet. We know there's discussion at the state level about stagnant revenues there and potential cuts or less funding available for school districts, and we don't know yet what the federal funding looks like. I have projected out what our balances will look like at June 30th, given the information that we have from this fiscal year and the different quarterly spend, and then use that to project out next year, fiscal year 26, only using the expense levels for FY 25, but backing out some one-time things or some things that we know that are coming that are in later slides. But what that and that doesn't include any inflationary factors, but just looking at actual expenses from this year and applying them to next year. So what we're looking at September 30th is a deficit of $3 million in our payroll and regular operating costs until we receive our tax collections in October. What is happening this September, we normally get our tax collections. We get I think it's around 7 million, but a pretty nice chunk of tax collections for people that receive their bills in August and pay right away. But what we're seeing this year is the second payroll in September, which is the first contract payment for 10-month employees for the 25-26 school year, is September 19th. And with the timing of when the tax collections come into the state and get processed to us and we get them processed, compared to when that payroll is going to hit, I do not believe those tax collections will be in at the same time. So that deficit is real and concerning. What we will need to do this summer is rely on some of our state funding lines that in previous years we would use later in the year, in the spring, like our Ed Sustainment funds. We would use that for local share of salaries. We would use it for substitutes throughout the year and then recode to use up the local funds or use up those funds with local payroll later in the spring. Last summer to get through, we had to use it in July and August. So we will do that again this year. But to still deal with that deficit of $3 million, because those state funds are factored into that calculation, we will need to borrow from our curriculum reserve account to do so. It's a local funded account, so it's our discretion to do what we need to do with it, but we will need to use those funds to cover payroll and then repay that fund in October when that bulk of those tax collections come in. What that means, those FY26 projections project out what our balance will be at June 30th, 2026. So looking forward to FY27 and next summer of July, August, and September of 26, we will continue to have those shortfalls created by insufficient funds in those accounts without the passage of a referendum.
Tammy, Mrs. Smith, what is the average cost of our local salary fund for salaries for a month?
So it's about $3.6 million, and that will continue for July, August, and the first pay of September, because in those months we're paying the remainder of the contracts, the 10-month contracts for this year.
The next slide talks about district office position reductions. We are reducing a district office 19.4%, and we've listed the positions that we are eliminating. If it's a retirement, we're not filling that position. We're dividing those duties among current employees, and we're also eliminating positions altogether. Any questions on that slide?
Just one question. So have you spoken with these people that are the percentages of these?
So just to talk about the process, if I could, for a moment, anybody who's displaced The building administrator or the department administrator talks to that employee, and then that employee has the opportunity, if they have any questions, I'm meeting over the next 3 days with 16 RIF non-tenured employees in person. We've gone around to different schools answering questions. Our displaced tenured employees, we've already done one round, which was independent of the referendum, and those were some programmatic changes we already made, and we will have this group. I will send out an email to them that I will work on this evening, explaining where they go, what the process is. On Friday, April 4th, we will meet with each one of them individually. IREA will be present as well. They've been present in every meeting we've had with employees. And then those employees by seniority will get to bump into a position held by a non-tenured employee, or if there's an opening. So we meet with them, we're available, and principals have met as well. And I want to talk just a second, if I could, about how the principals came up with this. We met as a cabinet to look at positions that would be least impactful in the classroom. Every decision's very difficult. We work very diligently. Every decision's a very difficult decision. But we met as a cabinet, then we've met at least 4 times, sometimes more with individual principals, looking at their staff, what cuts they can do that will be difficult, however, will least impact the classroom teacher. And our tenured teachers, although they're displaced, they will have a position in another building, in another position in our district. The next slide talks about school-based position reductions. On average, it's about a 10% reduction per building. Some buildings are slightly above, some buildings are slightly below, just depending on the individual characteristics of the building. We're looking at 55 paraprofessionals. The majority of those paraprofessionals were temporary employees. Some of them are getting, some of the positions are getting eliminated. This will result in a net RIF reduction in force of 15 paraprofessionals. We're also looking at 77.25, and the term I use, employees governed by the teacher collective bargaining agreement. It's teachers, counselors, mental health counselors, nurses, the variety of positions, and you can see them there. And those are the number of positions by position that we are eliminating.
So you have a time frame for letting these people know?
We do. So the time frame, and it's a little tight with our Easter break. So by law, you have to let a teacher know by May 15th if he or she has a contract for the next school year. We start Easter break on April 18th. We come back on April 28th, which is the day of the April board meeting. We do not hold a board meeting in May, so the April 28th board meeting is the last board meeting we have prior to the May 15th deadline. That's why we're meeting with displaced tenured employees on April 4th, and then between April 7th and April 17th, I will go around to all the buildings and meet individually with the RIFT non-tenured teachers. These are teachers who are not tenured in our district. They will not have a position in our district for the next school year. However, they will remain on a recall list for 2 years. And what that means, if that RIFT non-tenured employee, if we have a position that occurs for which that employee is certified, then we bring that employee back prior to doing any outside hires, so that to the greatest extent possible, we can bring our people back as soon as possible.
So some may not have already been informed, like one of the speakers alluded to the fact that some didn't know. That's because you're still within the time frame?
We're still within the time frame, and the April 4th day is when our displaced tenured employees choose a location, so we won't know which location they're choosing till April 4th. So then I won't know which non-tenured employees will be affected until we have those locations solidified.
The next slide, in looking at some cost savings measures, we're looking at the extra pay for extra responsibility or EPER pay scales. We have scales for both non-athletic positions and athletic positions. We're still analyzing this, and we'll bring it back to the April Finance Committee meeting for more discussion. But preliminarily, we're looking at a cost savings of about $389,000 on the non-athletic side and $82,000 on the athletic side. Other cost measures for next year, we're looking at a reduction of 10% in the majority of our discretionary budget lines. That will be a savings of about $405,000. The EPER scales, again, that we discussed in the prior slide. For extra work pay, we're looking at an analysis of flat pay rates versus the hourly rates. For homebound services, that is an estimated cost savings of about $70,000. And we're looking at beyond the workday services such as pay for before and after school programming. We're also implementing a formal electronic pre-authorization process for any of this extra pay. And we're assessing our after-school transportation services and looking for cost savings there. So considerations if a future referendum is unsuccessful, we're going to have to look at programs such as athletics. Currently, the budget for athletic programs is $1.8 million. Our academic programs and our career and technical education, also known as CTE programs.
So to be clear, because I know we had people that spoke at our March regular meeting, no programs have been cut at this time.
Not at this time. So what we're looking at is future referendum recommendations. So if we were to go again this spring, that would be in June. There is currently the fiscal urgency with that based on the information that I've provided tonight and over other board meetings and projected out for next year. We have the board consideration of the 10% revenue increase in year of reassessment. We've talked about that at previous board meetings briefly, but that by law, again, is where in a year of reassessment, the board can elect to collect 10% more in actual revenues than the prior year. So preliminarily, that looks to be about $4.6 million for next year, but we'll have solid numbers come June when we have our final tax collections, and allows the increased timing for board consideration of future cost savings. If we're looking to go in the fall, maybe October or November, we know that the county reassessment will be completed at that time. We've had a lot of questions through this process for that, although I think the calculator that we put on our website helped to get that message out. We will also in the fall have additional time for community outreach. We'll know the actual fiscal impact of the position reductions, as Mrs. Bunting spoke about. Those positions bump others, so the cost savings isn't necessarily the person that is the reduction in force. And we will be able to see what our increased operational costs will look like for next year as well, between inflation and opening up a new building.
Mrs. Smith, could you explain when these monies would be available, if in spring or fall we go forth with a referendum?
Absolutely. So the annual tax warrant is due to the county on the second Thursday of July. So typically every year we do it at the June board meeting, where the board approves the, outside of referendum and reassessment, the current expense rate doesn't change, but the tuition rate, the debt service rate, and the minor cap rate, that is signed by the superintendent and the board president. We send it to the county early July. That goes on the tax bills that go out in August. So the payments received in August and September is when our revenues for September and October are our major months of tax collection for the year. If we go to referendum in the beginning of June, we will receive any referendum increase in October. If we wait until October or November of 2025, those collections would not be until the following October, so October 2026, because it would go on the tax warrant that's due July 2026.
So just some logistics as well. The county likes for us, Department of Elections likes for us to give them around 90 days. That is somewhat flexible notice. So if we are to go back out in the spring, we noted June here as a possibility. That certainly needs to be decided tonight because that window is right upon us. The fall, we have a little bit more time, but again, we'd like to have that second date as soon as possible. So just for board awareness, that would need to be determined this evening.
And that is June 5th, is the date that Elections was willing to work with us
Correct.
on.
I know this is a lot to digest, and I know you've been thinking of this since March 20th. So we certainly want to answer any questions. I do want to share some stats that were provided today. In our referendum in March, we had 10,265 total 10,265 total votes. That was our third highest turnout ever. This was also our highest voter turnout ever for our first attempt by our voters. Sussex Central High School was a new polling place, this location. We talked about that last time. 65 voted in favor at that location. Overall turnout, however, was the lowest with only 767 votes. Millville Community Center was also a new polling site and saw extremely high participation, 2,035 total votes at that location. It had the strongest opposition, however, with low support at 42.3% voting for the referendum. Long Neck Elementary showed the lowest support with 41% for. And some of you have done this math, but I shared, but wanted just to kind of tease out some percentages. In the past, we have seen a significant increase in both total votes and support for the referendum during our second attempt. Some of you that have, Mr. Steele, you've been a part of several referendums, you've seen typically, and we hope that would be the case this time, additional support for during our second attempt. For example, total votes increased from 6,662 in November 2016 to 12,389 in March 2017. So I know you may have some additional questions based on what Ms. Smith went over, but thought it's important to share some of that, just kind of in summation of some of those votes from the 20th and also in recent past.
And should you decide tonight on the June 5th date, I have a resolution to read for that.
Any other questions, concerns, or comments?
If we want to come back bigger, better, and stronger, it's going to take a collaborative effort of the board, the community, the staff, the parents. We all have to join together. And I think in having a strategy, if we go forth in a short amount of time, we're going to have to work very hard to make that happen. Is it doable? Yes. But with spring break or Easter week, that gone in the short amount of time, and really weighing the pros and cons of the two choices, I guess my only other question is, as a financial director, do you feel that, I know you worked hard, you and Dr. Owens worked very hard, and Karen, in doing this. Do you feel that we have enough time to get done what needs to get done? Because we as a board, I know, want this to pass for our staff and for operations cost.
So my personal, I guess, and professional opinion, I think the momentum is there to go again in June. I think the vote was close enough. It was not a resounding no. I think a big hang-up was the reassessment, and I think with the data, based on, and it's by law, when we could get the new assessed values with the reassessment, I wished we had had a couple more weeks to explain that to the taxpayers with our calculator. But I do think there's enough time. We have, in the first referendum, we laid the groundwork for all of the presentations and the postcards and the information that we're presenting. And for this, it's an update. I think, to your point, I think there's more outreach and there's more things we can do to get the community informed and out there. But I do think there is less work on the back end to be able to go again in June.
I feel that referendum is very critical and we can't make a mistake and let it fail again. Personally, I feel rushing it could be a big mistake. If we go for the fall referendum, that gives us more time for planning. The biggest objective I came across was the confusion on reassessment. Even though you had great calculators online, I think October, November, reality hits. They get that paper bill in the mail. They know exactly what they're paying for. And I think that'll be a huge benefit to our cause. In the fall, we can't forget about our senior students. In the spring, they've already graduated. It's going to be hard with summer jobs for bringing them back in. Fall, they're in school. The referendum, we can encourage them to vote before, after school, while they're on school premise. And 1,000 plus seniors, that's a lot of votes.
If we form a strategic task force to make this happen, that really works together with community members, school members, board members, whoever's going to serve on this task force, they need time to collaborate and plan and really make this smart planning. That's just a thought I have.
Having gone through this, I'm going to echo Ms. Taylor. We have to be in lockstep with the community and the teachers union. And we have to make darn sure, moving forward, that we know every step of the way, we know the answer to every question that's going to be asked, and we have a plan for the future. Now, I do want to thank the people who spoke this evening, because I kept notes, and, to be very honest, there were good points. And I think one of the best points as a board member that I heard was from the gentleman from the plantations, where I think in the future, if we can get this referendum under our belt and move forward, we really ought to take a strategic plan and look for a yearly or every 2-year increase, at least to stay up with the cost of living, so we don't get behind and have to come and ask for the public for so much money. And I think that would probably be a much easier process for people to understand, particularly if we're in a year, when we're renegotiating contracts and we know what we're going to have. The smaller the ask, the better chance we have of getting it. And, it's nobody's fault, but by golly, this had to be about the worst time for coming out for a referendum saddled with the reassessment. It's almost like a comedy of errors, of everything's coming at one time, and we've got to work our way through that. But we're resilient. We've been and had our backs against the wall before, and we've had to reach down deep, and we've had to be, put our pride aside and say, hey, listen, we can't do this by ourselves. We've got to go out and ask for help. And I think with a strategic task force, I think that's going to be a huge factor in pushing this out and also taking a look. Now, are we locked into the same amount on this referendum as the ask was in the first?
To go again, yes.
And there's no way to make that in increments, correct?
Not without having to go out much sooner.
Mrs. Smith, you had, one of the things, and you were right there with me, with that confusion with the rate, it was attempting to explain that our rate would indeed, actually their rate, the community's rate, would indeed drop. Would we, if we were to go out sooner, would we be able to advertise a different rate this time?
Yes, so when we first decided to go to referendum, there's a notice of special election, there's the ballot that all has to go to elections, there's timelines that are required by Delaware code for that, and all of that gets approved through our attorney and their attorney, so we can move forward. So at the time, that was in January, and all we had was the old assessed values, the 1973 rates that we had to calculate those numbers. And then, like I said, February 15th, the county had the new assessed numbers, and we could do that. So should we go out again, whether it's June or in the fall, we will be able to use those new assessed values at the 2023 rates to calculate that rate. So instead of the $21.05, it's more likely to be 5.7 cents or 5.6 cents or something around that, based on what the assessed values are at the time. So I think, to your point, or that I think you're making, is that will alleviate a lot of confusion going into this, because what was happening is people were applying the $1.21 to their new assessment of 500,000 and thinking that the increase was super substantial.
And an additional point of clarity, I don't think you mentioned this, but maybe, we've got, two referendum can only occur in a 12-month time span. So either June, early fall, midwinter, whenever. If we are unsuccessful the second time, the next possible referendum would not be until March 20th of 2026. So just kind of putting that out there. That would be available to us. Hopefully that would not be needed.
Anybody else have any comments? If not, we know that we tried to stay on time, so we did not get to complete all the action in the executive session that we had so that we could be out here by 7:05, whenever that was. So at this time, we would need to, I need a motion to recess to go back into executive session so that we could finish up that stuff that the items that we were unable to take care of at that time. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That is unanimous. We'll now go back into executive session. Everybody signed up? You don't need to do this, okay. We'll reconvene our regular session meeting. Would do 5.0, new business, 5.02, referendum. We would entertain a motion as to what date you would like to have the referendum.
I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with the referendum in June as per the resolution. I think that, do we have a resolution?
We do. So we have a motion,
Second.
a second, and we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Mrs. Troublefield, will you poll the board, please?
Mrs. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Cathell?
Yes.
Mrs. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Peden?
No.
Mrs. Pryor?
Yes.
Mr. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor?
No.
Mrs. Wright?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no, and 0 abstentions.
Okay, the motion passes by a majority. Now, we would, Mark, does you have to read it, or you just want us to direct?
You can just, we do need a resolution, and we had a draft passed depending on the direction we went. So I would ask Mrs. Smith to go ahead and read the resolution for us, and then we can proceed forward with said resolution.
Okay. The resolution authorizing referendum to authorize the levy of additional taxes, whereas the Indian River School District Board of Education, also known as the Board, in accordance with the provisions of Title 14, Chapter 19 of the Delaware Code, has the power to levy taxes for school purposes. Whereas the Indian River School Districts, the district, current operating expenses are significantly greater than current and projected operating tax revenue, and additional funds are necessary for initiatives concerning, among others, recruitment and retention of staff, student achievement, and security. Whereas the board has determined that to continue to provide a sound, effective educational program in the district and meet current and projected expenses, it is necessary to levy and collect additional taxes. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the board as follows. 1, a special election shall be held in the district on June 5th, 2025, at the places designated by the Department of Elections. 2, the special election shall seek authority to levy additional taxes of $22,515,776 to fund current operating expenses effective July 1st, 2025. 3, a notice of special election shall be prepared and submitted to the Department of Elections. Thereafter, a final notice of special election shall be brought by administration to the board for approval.
We have heard the resolution. I'd entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to personnel, 6.01. The personnel agenda for March 31st, 2025. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Addendum, the personnel addendum. I would entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Addendum number 2. A motion? Oh, well, I think they're out of order, but you wanted to do that one? Yes. Okay. We'll go back to 6.03, Southern Delaware School of the Arts Principal Hire Recommendations.
Make a motion, we hire candidate number 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. 6.04, Personnel Addendum Number 2. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. Now we come to public comment, 7.01. We have no one that had signed up. Is there anyone in the audience now that would like to come forward? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That is unanimous. The meeting is adjourned.